The second banner of 1.4 will include our favorite IPC debt collector Topaz and her adorable trotter Numby. If you're wondering whether or not you should summon for her, many other people have made videos discussing her pros and cons. One of the more consistently brought up points about her is that she will be someone who can make characters who use follow-up attacks significantly better, much like how Kafka was for dot damage dealers. But how accurate is this? Will her kit actually be able to create a whole new meta or playstyle, or will it fall short of this expectation? More importantly, will this unique mechanic make her a must-have character? This is what we'll be discussing in this video. Before we get into it though, if you want to see more Honkai style content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Let me first get some disclaimers out of the way. Firstly, Topaz has yet to be released as I'm working on this video, so we may know how she works in general but not the details and numbers. Speaking of numbers, I won't be talking too deeply about that either, as again, we don't know them yet and I'm not a numbers guy. I'll mostly be talking about her based on the information in the livestream and how she generally works. Also, just to be completely transparent, I'm mostly going to talk about how she affects follow-up attack based teams in general instead of her entire kit. Now with that out of the way, let's explore why she is being talked about as the premier follow-up queen. As part of her skill, Topaz is able to apply a debuff of sorts to an enemy called the Proof of Death status. Essentially, whenever she uses her skill, this debuff gets applied. It's also applied randomly if an ally starts their turn and no enemy on field currently has the debuff. This means that throughout a fight, one enemy is guaranteed to have this status inflicted upon them. What this debuff does is quite straightforward. It just increases the incoming damage from follow-up attacks. Of course, it also has some functionality with Topaz's own kit, but the important takeaway is that it straight up buffs follow-up damage. So on paper, this seems like a close and shut case. She buffs follow-up attack damage on a single target, so any character that uses them will benefit from her being there. The thing is, I don't think that this alone will make follow-up characters generally better, at least the ones we currently have. A straight-up damage boost is obviously a good thing, but with the way follow-up characters work right now, this won't be enough to propel this playstyle into the meta, at least from what I can see. In the current roster, we have about 7 characters that use follow-up attacks as part of their mechanics. Herta, Himeko, Yanqing, Jingyuan, March, Qingchui, and Clara. Any one of these characters will benefit from the damage boost. The problem is that follow-up attack mechanics aren't that great right now. Each of them require an additional step to trigger and aren't as intuitive to use when compared to something like dot damage. Let's take Yanqing for example. In order to trigger his follow-up attack, you first need to use his skill to activate his Soul Steel Sync, and only then would his skill have a chance at triggering the follow-up attack. It's entirely possible that on the next turn, he doesn't even trigger the follow-up at all, wasting the buff Topaz provides. If he gets hit, then you're back to square one. But maybe this is only a Yanqing problem, right? Well, Himeko has a similar limitation. Against enemies that you can't weakness break, she doesn't trigger her follow-up. Herta doesn't do a follow-up if an enemy isn't below half health, which is difficult to constantly do with bosses, and Clara's counterattack isn't triggered if she isn't hit. Someone like Jingyuan may be able to make use of Topaz's buff unless of course he is CC'd before Lightning Lord takes action. What I'm trying to say is that on paper, Topaz's buff does indeed increase the damage a follow-up attack does. The issue is that the characters we currently have each requires a specific condition to be able to consistently do follow-ups. On her own, Topaz doesn't really fix this problem. It's not an issue with Topaz entirely, but the way most follow-up attacks are designed. The other thing you might have to consider is the slot that's taken up if you bring Topaz. If the purpose is just to buff a specific damage dealer, be it Jingyuan or Yanqing, would Topaz taking up a slot be more beneficial compared to a buffer like Bronya or Tingyun, or even a debuffer like Silver Wolf or Pela? Of course, Topaz does bring more damage to the party overall, but again, we're only focusing on the improvements to follow-up attackers, not Topaz herself in this video. Now, I'm not saying Topaz is bad and you shouldn't summon for her. I'm just making a point that purely for her follow-up attack buffing, she isn't going to be a game changer. This again isn't really her fault. Most characters with follow-up attacks have so many conditions that Topaz alone isn't going to fix all of them. In the future, there may be characters released that are intuitive enough to use without as many barriers, and for such characters, Topaz will likely be of great value. Right now though, it's probably safe to say she doesn't fix the existing follow-up characters. All she is able to do is ensure that those aforementioned characters hit a little bit harder, assuming they trigger their follow-up attack in the first place and it lands on the exact enemy with the debuff. Again, I have to mention that this doesn't make Topaz a bad character. She herself can make use of this debuff as her attacks are considered as follow-ups, so it's not entirely wasted. She's also a hunt fire character, something we don't currently have, and even Numby can take advantage of this debuff. So don't misunderstand my point. This video is focusing on her benefit to other follow-ups and is not an indictment of her own kit. I think that if you like her because of her design or because of Numby, it shouldn't stop you from summoning for her. But if you're only summoning because you expect her to make your Yanqing or Himeko suddenly jump to S plus rank, I don't think that will happen. That said, I might be wrong here, and when she is released, she might benefit them so incredibly greatly that she warrants a must-have. So before you pull the trigger, just hold off a little bit and see what the hardcore testers have to say about her. Let me know in the comments if you think Topaz will change the game or not. If you found this video entertaining or even helpful, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. As usual, have a nice day.